Is this glamorous? Is this really supposed to be glamorous? This started with tough, skillful men, and it exploded into a spectacle. What are the effects of doing this for life? Physically, psychologically, and mentally. This is the story of the British wrestling lifer.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
So we're in a weird situation. The government has said we're in a lockdown.
You couldn't even leave the house and go and get your shopping.
I think there's a lot of anxiety as well.
I was in Germany at the time when it broke, and Germany actually closed their borders down a lot quicker than they did here in the UK.
I work in the pharmaceutical industry. Several people I know died.
It didn't bother me too much. I mean, I've been in the business for so long that when the government said, well, you've got to stay at home and do nothing for a few months, I thought, OK then.
Many more got seriously ill.
Gyms were closed at the time being, you know.
I had to travel back from Germany through Switzerland to France to get the airport back, and I didn't know if I was going to get through.
I was really worried about shows coming back during the height of the pandemic.
All the non-essential shops were closed all over the world. Thousands died in each country. The roads were empty and life was looking very bleak. After 2 years of loneliness and depression, this is a story of how British wrestling rose back to the top.
Did I think wrestling would come back when it would? No, I didn't. I really didn't think the shows were going to start up again when they did.
Like something as kind of so physical contact as wrestling, for it to come back, it just felt a bit like that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think wrestling should have been one of the first things to stop and one of the last things to return.
Boris Johnson said that events could take place at 50%. There was a bit of a grey line because they didn't really want full contact between people.
You've got to keep your mind as occupied as much as possible because under the government's regulations, really, but unfortunately we just have to follow them.
All of a sudden, the shows come back and they were hot.
Was it too early?
Wrestling is a full contact thing. So I made contact with Paul Bristow, who's the Peterborough MP, and got some help and clarification that wrestling events could take place, 50% capacity.
Everywhere was selling out.
Beginning of the middle of summertime, where we just walked out of the pandemic in 2021.
And for the first 3 to 4 months, it was a really, really good atmosphere in the change room. It was closed because of the smearing campaigns on the internet. People were being very, very careful who they were going to talk to, who they were going to affiliate with, who was going to do what for who, when, why. But when the groups did merge back together, it was like being in a family again, which was what we really needed at that time, was to be back in a family. Families fall out, families argue, but when it comes time to put on a show, we put on a show, and that was the beauty about that moment in time, was it brought the correct members of the family back together.
And it was really strange because every family was separated from the next family, and you had red usual seats in a theatre, but then you had white seats, covers put over where people couldn't sit. It was like a Virgin Atlantic flight or something like that. It was very strange. But ITV came down, we ran the first wrestling show in the country, the first wrestling tour during that half term, and then during that summer we was putting 2 to 3 shows every day.
I know very little about wrestling, but a man who does know a lot is Sanjay. Sanjay, tell me, how good is it to be back here wrestling again post-COVID?
It's so great. It's been a long, hard year. We've all had a bit of a rough year, but it's back and it's bigger than better than ever.
What a beautiful venue to return to. We've been out for a year with COVID, and to really be back in front of a crowd, it's what makes for wrestling.
When I did come back, that's when I caught COVID, and I caught it from a wrestler.
A lot of them are younger than I am, and I was lucky enough to have some of the vaccinations, the first jab, the second jab, and I should think some of the other boys did. But you were never sure because how sort of sport we do, close contact, and then with the audience, there was always that problem where we meet people after the shows, the meet and greets. I was a bit wary of when people want to come next to you and put their arm around you for a photograph, and I didn't know how that was going to work, to be honest.
But I did get it and pass it on to my sister. And even now, getting on for a year and a half after then, she still can't taste properly.
People have, ultimately our customers have come back through the doors, And that's what's kept it going through all the kind of hardship. You know, LDN being like the company that it's been for such a long time, the reputation it has, they're basically market leaders now. And so they then went back, led to other people going, you know what, actually, we can come back too. And obviously, I think although it's a long way to go to how it was before, you know, wrestling in general and LDN, I think it still is great that it's come back. And you know, the shows that LDN are putting on have been like fantastic. You know, new stars are going to come through. You know, still got a lot of the old, and it's that nice mix of everything you want in a wrestling show.
Those did come back. It was all worthwhile. Everyone was desperate for live entertainment.
I felt sorry for the workers, the guys, the young lads and girls that were putting in all the effort, that were down the gym every day training to be the best. Of course, gyms were closed. No shows to perform, nowhere to show their talents. They would have been very frustrated.
I think coming back from lockdown was hard for a lot of people. I think people just wanted to have some fun, and I hope that we provided people with fun during that awkward time of coming out of lockdown, and where people coming to events and people showing up and not knowing, can we sit near people? Can we keep a distance? Because some people would show up with a face mask on, it wasn't compulsory. But I noticed after 10, 20 minutes they take it off and people start to go back to normal. And it's great now that we can go back to normal. And I'm very glad that we hopefully never have to have another lockdown again. But yeah, I'm glad that we were the first tour back, and I'm thankful to the fans for coming out, because it could have been opening the doors and nobody showing up. But thankfully we're busy every night.
Is this glamorous? Is this really supposed to be glamorous? This started with tough, skillful men, and it exploded into a spectacle. What are the effects of doing this for life? Physically, psychologically, and mentally. This is the story of the British wrestling lifer.